Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call to order today this uh, public roundtable of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. I am Councilmember Brooke Pinto, representing Ward 2 and Chairwoman of the committee. The time is now 12:18 p.m. on Monday, October 7th, 2024, and we are conducting this roundtable in person in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building and virtually via Zoom. We're also streaming on the DC Council website and on YouTube and X at @CM Brooke Pinto. The purpose of today's Oversight Roundtable is to discuss issues related to oversight of grant recipients under the Violence Intervention Program at the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. We refer to this office colloquially as ONSE. This roundtable was inspired by the allegations over the summer that Councilmember Trayon White accepted bribes in exchange for attempting to influence ONSE selection of violence intervention grantees. The council has established a separate ad hoc committee to investigate these claims as they relate to my colleagues' residency and bribery charges. An outside law firm has been retained, and Councilmember McDuffie is leading that process. I do not intend for this committee to duplicate those efforts or undertake our own separate investigation. I do, however, have a responsibility to understand the impacts of these allegations on ONSE and the office of our Violence Interruption Program, over which this committee has oversight. I want to be very clear from the outset that there were no specific allegations that ONSE staff did anything wrong here. But even so, the indictment damaged the already low public trust in the ONSE VI program. I have heard many concerns and frustrations about our VI program over the past few years, including from many residents in the communities that the program is supposed to be serving. Given how important trust is to the work that our VIs do, it is very important that we take urgent and comprehensive steps to address this. I also want to make very clear, I believe in our violence interruption program, and I believe in violence intervention as an important model for our city. We have seen our violence interrupters engage in meaningful, challenging, often dangerous work to discourage violence and help connect folks who are at high risk with needed resources and opportunities. I have studied other successful violence interruption models around the country, and something that they all have in common is consistent buy-in from everyone, from the mayor to the chief of police, to religious leaders, to the violence interrupters themselves, and the broader community. These models are complicated, but I know they can work if we work collaboratively together. I am not giving up on this important program. I have been disappointed by some of the commentary that I've seen in the wake of these allegations, some suggesting that we should disband the entire VI program. I believe quick fixes like these are unproductive and ignore the evidence that we have seen in DC and from other cities that violence intervention, when done well, can be a powerful tool that stops violence before it occurs. And that is in the best interest of everyone. Violence intervention is a critical part of our public safety ecosystem in the district. Working in partnership with community-based organizations, violence interruption specialists do the exceptionally hard work of building relationships with community members, mentoring people at a high risk of being victim to or perpetrator of violence, de-escalating conflicts, and facilitating ceasefires and mediations. The takeaway from the recent allegations for me is not that we should disband these programs. It's that we need much more oversight of them and a stronger adherence to consistency and best practices in issuing all of these grants and making sure that our violence interrupters have what they need to be successful. Millions of taxpayer dollars are at stake with these programs, and even more pressing, residents' lives are at stake. These allegations also highlighted for me the need for the executive to devote much more time and attention to ONSE. The office has been without a permanent director for almost a year and a half now, and I have not gotten much indication that getting a permanent director in place is that high of a priority. I have a lot of respect for the work that Interim Director Sneed has been doing in this role. And I think we either need to empower her by making her the permanent director or find a qualified candidate soon. We cannot continue to have this position unfilled. One other issue I think is important and relevant to our conversation today is the possibility of a merger of the ONSE VI program and OAG's Cure the Streets program. We have been discussing for many months now how to best merge these programs. I continue to believe that one VI program for our city is a much more productive and hopefully long-term path forward. I'm concerned that the allegations that we have heard over the summer undermine these efforts. At the same time, there are a number of steps that I've been raising for months that we can and should take in the interim with ONSE and the Attorney General's office, like standardizing our training for VIs, standardizing our grant management disbursement of the dollars. These could at least be steps towards a merger that might have also helped avoid some of the issues that we're seeing today. I'm hoping that the testimony today will inform how we move forward with these programs and with a merger in the future. I do want to note I plan on holding a second hearing this fall about how we're going to move forward and implement some of the improvements to help rebuild the public trust and efficacy in our VI programs, ensure that we are good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and more generally improve the efficacy of this important program. Today, I want to focus more on how we got here in the first place, what has gone on with our grants, the status of the executive's internal investigation that has begun, and give the public a greater understanding of where things currently stand with ONSE. Frankly, a lot of questions need to be answered. With that, I'm going to turn to my colleagues who have joined us today. We have been joined by my Ward 1 colleague, Councilmember Brianne Nadeau, and I will turn to her now for any opening statement you may have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate how many people are here today in the chamber as we discuss important issues concerning our community and the organizations that serve it. Today's an important first step to demand accountability and answers from the executive, specifically ONSE Interim Director Quelly Sneed and the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, Lindsay Apaya. ONSE has been without a permanent director since May of 2023, a deficiency that appears to have set the stage for a lack of vision and organizational structure at the agency. And now the agency finds itself in the spotlight due to allegations of illegal activities with one of its contractors, Life Deeds. District residents deserve better. I think it's fair to say that the problems at ONSE did not just appear with the Life Deeds incidents, but this current high-profile situation serves as an opportunity to dive into what went wrong here and what systemic issues lie underneath. Life Deeds contracts were previously terminated in 2019 by the Department of Human Services for falsifying documents, raising concerns about the organization's integrity and capability, yet ONSE continued to award them contracts. It's crucial for us to understand the reasoning behind this decision and how it aligns with the Council's mandate to prioritize vendors with a history of sound performance. Last week, City Administrator Kevin Donahue announced the termination of all Life Deeds contracts with the city. This is a significant development, and I'll be asking for clarity on which contracts are being terminated and what the plan is for transitioning violence interruption services to a new grantee. Speaking of oversight, this brings us to the Progressive Life Center, the primary organization currently managing grants for ONSE, which is problematic. PLC is paid a hefty $5 million to conduct oversight and manage the agency's grants, something that should be done in-house. ONSE should be prepared to answer why it relies on an external entity for grant oversight long after the federal funds have dried up. How much money could ONSE be saving district residents if it did this in-house? I've received numerous complaints from the community about PLC's treatment of community organizations providing VI services. I've heard that PLC has refused to approve the release of allocated funds for community groups to take on additional work. And I've received alarming reports that PLC refuses to approve funding for grants meant to be for the community based on reasons unknown and not disclosed. To me, this raises significant concerns about how funds are being allocated, or rather withheld, from those who need them most. Finally, I'd like to address a critical funding matter in which I've not been able to get a straight answer from the executive for over a year now. I allocated $800,000 in the FY 2024 budget specifically for the Ward 1 Violence Interruption Program. I'm frustrated because I haven't received clear answers regarding where this money has been allocated. How has the funding been utilized? What's it been spent on? Where did the money go? I want to be clear. The leadership of Life Deeds failed us in specific ways owing to illegal activities. That doesn't represent the entirety of either the people working there or the violence interruption space here in DC. While some have used and will use this situation to denigrate the work of violence interruption, there is much evidence telling us that these organizations can and do valuable work in a highly challenging environment, one in which lives, sometimes including those of the workers themselves, are at risk. What needs to be addressed are the issues that led to this situation, systemic deficiencies in the oversight of these programs, and how we can identify and expand the practices that have proven successful and identify and adjust or discontinue those that have not. Throughout this discussion, this roundtable today, my goal is to hold those in charge accountable and ensure that our community receives the support it desperately needs. We have a responsibility to make sure that funding is effectively utilized and that organizations are held to the highest standards of performance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Nadeau, and thank you for joining us today. I'll now call our first panel of public witnesses to the table. The first person I call can sit farthest to my right and your left, and we'll move down the table. We're going to start with our in-person witnesses, Marcus Ellis, Executive Director of Peace for DC, Roger Marmette, Founder and Board Chair of Peace for DC, Feliciano Canty, Public Witness, Pastor Delonte Golston, Pastor, Peace Fellowship Church and Peace Walks, DC. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. As a reminder, when you're speaking, if you could turn on your microphone, which is on the button in front of you, and we'll start with you, Mr. Ellis.
All right, good morning. Again, my name is Marcus Ellis. I serve as the Executive Director for Peace for DC, where we are committed to ending gun violence in DC by building up the community violence intervention workforce, which forms the backbone of DC's alternative system of public safety. We are focused on systems change to heal trauma, transform the lives of those highest at risk of violence, and build coordinated, evidence-based, community-led strategies. The reality is we have a huge coordination issue as it pertains to our public safety ecosystem. Whenever I travel in my national capacity in CVI work, the same sentiment is made. DC is resource rich, yet coordination poor. Last year, Community Justice ranked DC #1 overall in investment in CVI during a year that saw some of our highest gun violence numbers. These issues impact the overall ability for our city to have a true public health approach designed to prevent gun violence. Ultimately, this lack of coordination causes us to have cracks in our system that don't allow for offices like ONSE to be successful. The lack of consistency in leadership at the office adds to the problem as well. Councilmember, you alluded to it today. You and I had a discussion almost a year ago about the director's position in ONSE, and here we are again today having the exact same conversation. Why isn't this agency afforded the same opportunities as others, understanding the important values they have in saving lives? Additionally, approximately a year ago, I came before you and your colleagues to express the need for our city to have a true comprehensive strategic plan for public safety. I reminded you all of 2015 when Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Nesbitt co-chaired the Safer Stronger DC Advisory Committee, which developed and submitted over 64 recommendations in a plan to our city's leadership. I also testified on a plan created by the National Institute of Criminal Justice that birthed the People of Promise program during my time as Chief of Staff at ONSE. Yet again, I asked the same question. Where can I find our city's comprehensive plan? I can't. Why is community violence intervention proven to be impactful in cities like Newark, Baltimore, and Philadelphia? Because they have a plan designed by both government and community stakeholders and ultimately owned by the constituents of their city. Their business, faith-based, and philanthropic leaders are all included as well. Part of their strategy includes ensuring the CVI profession is well compensated, not understaffed, has health benefits across the board, and is afforded a true opportunity to be successful. Strategic plans protect our work from calls to dismantle it, like those we heard from the leadership of the police union, while just 1 week prior to, the police chief publicly stated the importance of CVI in our city's year-to-date decline in gun violence. In 2011-2012, DC dropped to 88 homicides. We had a police chief in Kathy Lanier doing a great job leading her space. We had an abundance of CVI work happening across the city as well. During that time, the ethics of our work was also being questioned. Within 2 years, CVI was all but eliminated, and we saw a steady climb in gun violence over the course of several years. We are very clear in our profession that we are under attack because of the accusations against some connected to our work. The thought I would want to leave us with is this. When members of the police force are being investigated for wrongdoing, do we dismantle the police force? No, we don't. When a person in banking is found to be illegally stealing money from their organization, do we say, let's get rid of the banking industry? No, we don't. Let's be sure to exercise those same principles now and continue to invest, grow, critique, and include CVI as an essential part of our public safety ecosystem. Thank you for listening. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellis. Mr. Marmette?
Thank you. My son was murdered in DC 6 years ago this month at 22 years old, just driving across town when a bullet shattered his car window and severed his carotid artery. At that point, I was grateful for the work of the police department and prosecutors to address that crime. But I often wonder what might have happened if the city had adopted fully scaled, deeply ingrained community violence intervention work before Tom's killer took that retaliatory shooting. I'll never know, but what I have learned is that around the country, cities are getting this right. And I've also learned that here in DC, we have some of the finest individuals trying to get it right and working in public safety from a community-powered perspective. Many of them who have shown me and my family more love than I could ever imagine are in this room. But something is missing. Something is deeply missing. It's leadership, as Marcus mentioned, and you mentioned in your testimony, Chairperson. But it's, among other things, a few steps that I'd like to briefly outline. Not only do we not have a plan, well, I use this as a file folder and it works really well. And we've had testimony in the past from the city administrator and the deputy mayor saying we're adopting this plan. But violence intervention was cut by over $8 million this year at the Office of Neighborhood Safety. We're not getting this right because we don't have goals, specific, measurable, time-bound goals. We don't have a system in place that gets decisions around where to put resources out of politics and out of the news cycle. You'll hear later from some academic experts, Daniel Webster and Joe Richardson, who could advise us on where we need to be, who could help each organization with measurements, metrics, and finding the outcomes they need with the individuals driving violence. We need to go deeper, not wider. The ONSE office is in 27 neighborhoods with not enough staffing and with not much more than money for street outreach. We need deep intervention to help people find an exit ramp. Before we all celebrate, let's remember, we are 80% higher in homicides to date this year than in 2014. 10 years later, we're not getting the job done. We need to do it, and I don't know why we can't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marmet. Feliciano Canty, public witness. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
I am a radio personality, television personality, also a deacon, a father, and also a designer of a program at CSILSA on the federal level, working with returning citizens for the last 5 years. And I'm also working with the ONSE, the Pathways program, over the last 3 years. I've directly worked with these individuals that we would label as shooters. The ONSE Pathways program is the most aggressive and robust gun violence reduction program in the district. And I would like to believe that some of that 31% that we've seen in decline is partially because of that program. I've seen the program transform lives of Washingtonians firsthand. Some of them are here right now. But over and over again, I've heard several of the ambassadors say this: why didn't I get this kind of a support before I got into trouble? I probably wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. So several of the individuals in the Pathways programs have been 100% transformed completely for the rest of their lives based off what I've seen. Pathways, it works. My question is this: when is the last time that you sat down with some of these ambassadors to talk with them about their lives and the challenges that they've faced? The reason why I ask that question is because I believe that listening is going to be part of the solution to find out exactly what's really going on. Yes, there has been challenges. With any program, there's going to be challenges. I don't know one program that doesn't have challenges. I think that at this point, we need to look at the areas that we need to shore up and fix and get it done. I think that we owe it to Washingtonians to do this work. I believe we have all the great minds in this building, in this city, and outside of this building to get that work done. And I look forward to being part of that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Canty. Pastor Delonte Golston.
Good afternoon, Chairman Pinto. Good afternoon, Councilmember Nadeau and everybody here today. My name is Pastor Delonte Golston. I pastor Peace Fellowship Church in Ward 7, and I serve as a board member of Peace for DC. I was grateful to be appointed by this council to be a member of the Police Reform Commission from 2021 to 2022. I also lead a coalition called Peace Walks DC, which is a coalition of houses of worship and community who are committed to preventing violence in our city by following a season of peace model that we learned from Reverend Jeffrey Brown in Boston from their Roxbury Miracle that was brought to DC in the 90s. I also am a public safety co-chair for the Washington Interfaith Network. In my observation, I'm not going to read what I have here. I'm just going to try to speak from the heart for a moment. My observation from the very beginning, this Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement has been set up to fail. When it started with the NEAR Act in 2017 and was initially funded with $1 million to start a prevention program, it was very, very clear that our executive was not serious about fully funding this work. I was trained by Live for USA when I was organizing around police accountability and community violence in Los Angeles. The people who founded this work were faith-based leaders in Richmond and Oakland, California. I was trained by those community organizers to do this work. The Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement in Richmond, California is different from the Office of Neighborhood and Safety and Engagement in DC in one critical way. There has always been not only faith-based involvement, government involvement, community-based organization involvement, but the critical piece that's been missing is business and philanthropic involvement in this work. The reason why St. Paul, Minnesota has seen significant reductions in homicides. Baltimore has seen significant reductions in homicide. Philadelphia has seen significant reductions in homicide. New York has seen 30% reductions. Each of these cities that I named have seen at least 30% reductions in homicides because there has been a full employment model that has been committed to by the business community in those cities, in addition to the philanthropic community in those cities. And the executive has decided to lead the effort in those cities. Those cities are not trying to piecemeal efforts. So I want to align my comments and associate my comments with what has been stated by Marcus and by Roger and by my colleague to my left. But I want to add that how can we expect for there to be fidelity to any kind of metric? How can we expect for there to be fidelity, any kind of system that holds these agencies accountable if we're not even fully funding the work to begin with? How many Pathways program graduates graduate to get a certificate in our hand? We celebrate them, we give them a hug. They've been through this transformative experience. And how many of them actually have a place to live when they graduate? How many of them actually have a job? Because we live in a city where our executive is more concerned about providing benefits and subsidies to developers than our executive is with providing jobs to men and women who are the most vulnerable in our city. I love our mayor. I will always support her. The reality is that our city is bleeding. And 23% of reduction in homicides might sound good, but where I minister and where I serve and where we do our work on a daily basis, the balloon releases are still happening, the vigils are still happening, our communities are still hurting. This work must be fully funded. We cannot allow ourselves to be distracted in this moment by the personal peccadillo and moral failings of one person whom I love, who serves our city, has done the best he could, but he's a person, he failed. The executive director of Life Deeds is a person, he failed. This is a movement that needs to be supported. And I want to thank you for recognizing, both of you, councilwomen, for recognizing the important need of this work in our community. But we have to push our leadership in this city to really critically bring business and philanthropy to the table to provide the resources that this work really needs. Yes, I will stand right here and we will argue for increased metrics, accountability to make this work efficacious in the ways that it must be. Absolutely. But we still haven't even gotten started with this work yet.
Thank you very much, Pastor. And thank you all for your testimony and the hugely important work that all of you engage in every single day to bring peace to our city. And I really appreciate it. I want to start with kind of the current grant process, because when we look to determine how we got here and we talk about more funding and more investment, from your perspective, how is the disbursement of the current grant processes going from ONSE, and how can we do that better? I'll start with you, Mr. Ellis.
I think it's obviously, I acknowledged it in my testimony, but of course I was the chief of staff at ONSE from its inception. One, I just want to start by saying that I believe the deputy mayor will be testifying later, and how we got to using PLC is a great question to ask her directly. That being said, our grant terms are being disseminated in a fashion that does not allow so many of the people in this room to live their life in a meaningful way because the terms are so short. They don't give you an opportunity to look 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead and plan your life because you don't know when that grant is going to go away. I think the other issue we have, and you mentioned it, and I know that you're working on it, it is troublesome that we have grants coming from 2 different entities to do the work. We need a systematic approach that allows this to be longer, but again, is under one system, so that we can have the And I think the pastor said it, we want the accountability. We know we need that in order for our work to be successful, but by design, the way that it's being done now is not going to help get us there.
So let me ask you then about the length of the grants, because we have this challenge with a number of different agencies too. We see this with OVSJG and the grants that we give out. Many organizations come to us and say, we need to know that this is not going to end after a year. We need longer term planning. And we have an anti-deficiency statute in the city that basically disallows us from promising money longer than a year without being